Bless the Lord, O my soul, bless.
Hi, thanks for being here again with us on Daily Inspiration. Well, for this video, I'd like to explain the 5 differences between Orthodoxy and Evangelicalism. I love learning about other branches of Christianity, and even if I'm a Catholic, it's something that I enjoy learning, and if you'd like to comment on this video, please remember to be respectful towards one another. Anyway, let's get on with the first on the list then. Number 1. Orthodox worship is liturgical, but evangelical worship tends not to be. There are a handful of evangelical churches that are liturgical, but most are not. Most are now doing worship with contemporary music, largely speaking the services focused on the sermon. But in the Orthodox Church, most of the worship is, and what that means is that their services are largely sung, and they are largely prayer, and there are ritual actions and ritual words and lots of scripture reading, lots and lots of scripture being used as prayer. And the sermon, which is not a feature of every single Orthodox service, is usually a much lesser part of the service. Number 2. The Orthodox believe that holiness can reside in physical places and objects. Most evangelicals would probably not affirm that idea, although it's probably not a teaching for most of them, that they would say that holiness doesn't reside in physical stuff. But for the Orthodox, they have a sense that God's presence exists in certain places and certain objects. Number 3. The interpretation of the Bible. For evangelicals, interpretation of the Bible can take multiple forms, but largely speaking, the way that the average evangelical interprets the Bible is by simply reading it and asking himself or herself the question, what does this mean to me? For an Orthodox Christian, however, Bible reading or Bible interpretation are largely found primarily in the midst of church services. And if you look at history actually, especially long before people could own their own Bible, that's the place where most people were able to contact Scripture at all, have any kind of connection with it, is they heard it read out loud in church services. But the key thing is that for the Orthodox, they have a sense of what the Bible means within the scope of tradition, history, church services, the ecumenical councils, what the church fathers have said, that those saints that interpret the Bible. So the question of what does this mean to me? While it's important, our own opinion, our own sense of what it means is not the most important thing for an Orthodox Christian. Number 4. Views on the church. Unlike evangelicals, the Orthodox believe that there is actually just one church, and that church is governed through an episcopacy, that is bishops with apostolic succession, that is that historical genealogy of sorts from the apostles down to the bishops in the present day. The average evangelical, his church is governed congregationally, even if he does belong to a part of a denomination, and so the local congregation tends to have the highest say in most matters. But for the Orthodox Church, the authority is based in their bishops, whom they believe have the succession from the apostles. There aren't multiple denominations that all are truly Christian in the fullest sense. For the Orthodox, there's only one, and that's the Orthodox Church. And finally, number 5. What is salvation? For the average evangelical, salvation means what happens to you when you die, you go to heaven and not to hell. For the Orthodox Christians, on the other hand, salvation is about a lot more than that. It must be said that while the Orthodox are concerned about what happens to them after they die, but also for them, salvation is process, rather than a single event like we are saved on this day or that day and therefore we're going to heaven. That's not how the Orthodox see things. For the Orthodox, it's a process that begins with the work of God in the believer and with baptism, with the sacraments, with the grace of God in them. Basically, we're given all the tools that we need to engage in the long-term process of salvation, which is ultimately a work of God, but is only done with our cooperation. In other words, God is not going to force us to be saved, and so the more that we cooperate with God, the more like Him we become. And so for the Orthodox, salvation is this long-term engagement with God that lasts into eternity. So even after, God willing, we do go to heaven, after the resurrection and so forth, we can still become more and more like God throughout the ages. This is often referred to with the technical term theosis. It means that one become more and more like God. Although we don't become God, we become more and more like God throughout the ages. Well, I hope this video is helpful for you, and as I said earlier in the video, please comment respectfully if you have anything to say of the matter.